and welcome to therapies, where we bring you bite-sized episodes, each one a piece of the puzzle that helps to explain the therapy world, the research behind it all, and how it relates to families. My name is Dr. Dayna, physiotherapist and clinical lead at the Healthy Strides Foundation. It is my privilege to be hosting this podcast, one that is directed for families of children with neurodisabilities. We hope to be able to answer some of your questions through this format. To help us navigate our way through these big questions, we have the lovely, the one and only Kate co-hosting this podcast. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you, Dayna. Hello. It's great to be back.
Oh, it's always good to be here. How are you today?
I'm really good today. How are you
good.
today?
I'm really good today as well. I'm looking forward to another good conversation.
Me too.
Yes.
But of course, it's not a fun conversation if we don't start it off with one of your very interesting pieces of research that you found.
Well, today is no exception to that. So
Great.
I have recently found in a new article published just a few days ago.
Okay.
In the
You heard it here
Journal of
first.
Frontiers in Behavioral Neuroscience. So, did you know that you can identify different brain activity patterns and that is linked to your movie genre preference?
Ooh, that's interesting.
Isn't it? Okay, so I'm going to read a
Again,
bit
weird that they got this funded, but cool.
I know, I worked really hard to get my research funded.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure this will help us one day.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So this is a research team in Germany, and they found that individuals who like action movies show high activity in the amygdala, which is a brain region involved in emotional processing, compared to those without such preferences. So yes, high action movies, amygdala, emotional processing. Let's think about that for a second, which is really interesting. So for those who really like comedies, though, there's increased activity in both the amygdala and the nucleus accumbens. So that's associated with the brain's reward and pleasure systems.
Okay.
So I guess you would want to watch more of that kind of movie if you feel like you need, which kind of makes sense. Like if you watch comedy, you usually want something in return.
Yes.
You want to
100%.
replenish your levels, and so you have that reward system. So that makes a bit more sense.
Yeah.
So then you've got the people who really like crime, thriller, or documentaries. They're both all put together. So crime, thriller, and documentary displayed lower activity in all of these regions. So
Interesting.
you don't get a whole lot back.
That's so interesting.
Isn't it?
I mean, yeah, I can't do crime and thriller stuff myself personally.
It's pretty scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just don't need any more scary
you don't
stuff.
need it. You don't need to be freaked out walking to the car.
Absolutely not. No.
It's
Who's
always
in the
walking
back
to the
seat?
car.
Who's following me? I don't need to worry about these things.
So my take home for this is watch them comedies. It fits all the bills. You've got emotional processing.
Perfect.
And you've also got the fact that you've got some, pleasure reward systems. We all need a bit of that, and it's for free. Just sit down, watch a bit of comedy and laugh it off.
I love that.
So it's actually a fun fact.
Great fun fact.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You heard it here first. Just released just a few days ago.
Love that.
So what do you
Are
have
you
for us
ready?
to discuss today?
So this is an interesting one, Dayna. This is actually something that came off. So we had a discussion a couple of weeks ago in a previous podcast, and I very briefly touched on a type of therapy called Vojta at the end of our podcast.
Yes.
We've actually had quite a lot of questions come through from families since touching on that, which I'm glad about because as I mentioned in it, I wish I knew more about it at the time, which is, I guess, why other families have now gone, hey, I'd like to know a bit more too. So let's have a look here. So it wasn't just about Vojta, it was about Bobath, and there were some other more sort of controversial types of therapies that are advertised to benefit people with neurodisabilities. Given our limited time today, I thought maybe we would cover this over a couple of episodes if that's okay with you.
Sounds good.
Great.
Yes.
So I think this week let's focus on Vojta, and then I thought we'd lump that in with Bobath because I found through my research that they're actually quite similar types of therapies.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. So I'll round up all the questions and try and sort of summarise as, can you please tell us why the therapies are, first of all, controversial and why are they so hard to access?
Okay. Oh, those are very good questions. Where do I start? Okay, so in terms of controversial, I would say the controversies really comes from the real contrast in current knowledge and really old knowledge.
Yes.
So back in the day, I would say, you know, when physiotherapy first came about, we were really trying to understand what we could do to improve the lives of people who have a neurological condition. And so it was really in its infancy back in the 50s and the 60s, and people were just trying to find ways to move children to live in a better life. And so that's how it all started. So, you know, always well-intended. Yeah, that's right. Great. So it, you know, originally a lot of children with disabilities back in the 40s, 50s and 60s was really institutionalized. So if you had a child with a disability, you would often, you know, live away from home and live in an institution. Wow. And so there was a lot of, you know, when you think about that and old science, we've shifted a long way.
A huge way.
Thank goodness, right?
Thank goodness.
Our children, you know, they benefit being at home with their families. Yeah. And the science has also come a really long way because we can now do neuroimaging. We understand how the brain actually works. Back then, we didn't have any neuroimaging, so we were kind of making guesses on what we thought the brain did, how it learned. And we're just understanding, you know, how children with cerebral palsy, that was a big focus, how they respond. And without treatment, what do they look like? And so it all came about from that. Okay. So really recently now, and I think the controversies all probably really started, and when I say controversy, it's more like the discussions really started in 2012, where there was a really big literature review, which we call a systematic review, where researchers take every little bit of science they can find in the area that were published since the 70s. Wow. So we took everything. That's a lot of data. Yeah, a lot of data. And so the researchers were then able to compile and go, okay, based on all this published research, we can look at what is safe, what is causing harm, what is not causing harm, and alongside that, what is actually effective in improving outcomes versus those that don't improve outcomes. Yeah. And so when they first did that in 2012, they sort of created this visual system, and we sort of call it the bubble chart or the traffic light system, and it kind of has green for go. Yeah. If it's published in green and the therapies listed there in green, it means that there's a lot of research in it. It has the best opportunity for a best outcome for our kids, and it's safe.
Okay, great. We like green.
We like green. We like green. Cool. Go. Then you've got all the amber, which is like the yellow. It's kind of like, oh, there's not enough research yet to really show it's effective. Probably need a bit more research. Probably need better quality research. Okay. So far what we can see is it looks pretty good. Doesn't seem to cause harm. Yeah. So give it a go, but make sure you measure the outcomes for your child. So we need more research though. But we're not going to say no. We're going to say, hey, let's have a look at this area in a bit more detail, and a call to action to researchers to do more in this. Okay. So that was that. And then there's like a dotted line, which is called the worth it line. Oh, gosh. Is it above the worth it line or below the worth it line? So everything that was green was way above the worth it line. There are some yellows that were above the worth it line, but then there are some that were below the worth it line, where they go, oh, it's not a lot of research in it yet, but we're looking at some of the way that they're doing the therapy or the thinking behind the therapy doesn't align with what we currently know about the brain. Okay. So there was those ones, and then there was the red bubbles, which was like below the worth it line. And basically it's saying don't do it. Why? Because it causes harm. Okay. Or it doesn't matter how much you do of it, there's no good outcome. Wow. So it's worthwhile for us to know about it. And so
it so is.
That's where it all started. Okay. And then over the course of the next 10 years, another one was done again quite recently, probably just shy of 10 years. Another one was done. There was heaps more research. So it worked. Awesome. There was a call to action and everyone did more research, better quality, right? And then the same ones stayed green. Some of the yellow ones became green. Awesome. Some of the yellow ones became red. Right. And then the ones who were already red before stayed red. Okay. And two of those are Vojta and NDT/Bobath. So Bobath is also called neurodevelopmental therapy. Okay. So that's kind of the history of it. Wow. And so it's not something that we've gone, click your fingers, we've decided this is not worth it. It's been the course of decades and lots of research. And when you put all these kids together from all these research studies together, it's tens of thousands of kids who've been in research that we're making this call on. Okay. So it's not flimsy evidence. It's pretty good evidence, right? So
That's the kind of evidence I want to go off.
That's right. Well, when you're making decisions for you about your child.
Yeah.
So the first one that's probably really interesting to talk about is probably Vojta.
Okay, yep.
So Vojta, I know you spoke about that last time, and we can talk a bit more about your experience.
Sure.
But the reason why Vojta is below the worth it line in a red bubble is because, one, there's actually not a lot of evidence around it. So in terms of publications, no one's really gone, we're publishing it to show great outcomes.
Okay.
So, you'd published often to show good outcomes.
Yeah, if you had them, you'd want to show them
That's
off,
right. That's right. And so there's not even any case studies. Case studies are the lowest level of evidence, where we just study one child, and it's low-level evidence because you can't say what happened to that child will happen to every other child, right? It's your experience. So that's why you want bigger numbers.
Yeah.
And so there are just a few sort of case studies, not particularly in children with cerebral palsy. And the science behind it is really based on that real old science, that stuff I was talking about back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, of that like initial thoughts about what we think might be happening.
Yep.
And as the science moved on, Vojta just didn't. It just stayed with that old thinking.
Yeah.
So that's really based on what we call passive interventions, where a therapist is often moving the child into position.
Yes.
It's where we are working on reflexes. So children who have cerebral palsy, there's a brain injury, and so it causes sort of hyper-reflexive, so they've got more reflexes, and that can often get in the way of function.
Yep.
And so the thinking is like, let's get rid of some of these reflexes. They do a lot of these sort of reflex integration sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But that we've now really shown that is not current thinking either. Reflexes are part of what the body does as a result of the brain injury.
Yeah.
And it's reflexes. It's not cognitively controlled. You can't control yourself in having that. So
if you could, you would.
You would, that's right. And you can't. So you can't keep spending all this time trying to go, we're going to integrate these reflexes. The evidence shows you can't do that. Over time, they can become stronger and they can dissipate. But that is a process that therapy is not going to do that.
Yeah.
And it's not cognitively controlled. So it just contrasts completely. It doesn't integrate into function. So we know now more than ever that if you want to work on an actual skill, you have to practice the skill in the context you're going to do it in.
Yeah.
So if you want better head control, you can't just sort of sit someone and move something around so their head bobbles and eventually gets straighter.
Yeah.
That's not task specific. Task specific, if you want better head control so that you're sitting, well, you work on actual sitting.
Yeah.
You actually do the task. Otherwise, it makes no sense. And the last part is it has to be really engaging. Like the person has to be an active participant of it. Like you can't learn any skill unless you're actively thinking, wanting, desiring, moving, problem solving.
Yeah.
That's how you learn new skills. And that's why Vojta and the thinking, the science behind it doesn't add up.
Absolutely.
So what was your experience?
That was definitely an experience. So it was definitely, so we took our child as a baby. So I think he might have been 6 or 7 months old. And this was actually prior to that second study. So there wasn't anything at that time saying it was red or below the line, because I promised I wouldn't do anything knowing that.
Yeah, of course.
So it was putting him into positions and then pressing really hard on pressure points.
Oh, okay.
That would then trigger him to have, that physiological response, a movement that he wasn't doing previously.
Right.
He hated it. We had to pin him down. He would fight us. He would scream the whole time, and we would be told that that's because it's working. So it was absolutely horrible. Yeah. Thankfully, it just got too much for me, and I was like, I just can't do this anymore. My mum intuition just kicked in, and I was like, I don't care what the research is. This isn't for us. This isn't for me.
Yes.
And then luckily, we found you. I think we found you like a week or two once we got back from doing this intensive Vojta therapy, and I talked to you about it. Yeah. And you had showed me, I think at that time it was sitting like in the orange, and you explained how it works, and that's when I was like, that all makes sense to me, and that made sense as to why he was responding the way he was, all of those things, and gave me comfort that I had done the right thing by stopping it.
Absolutely.
But I definitely found the person who was doing it really lovely person, very passionate about children's well-being and what they were doing, explained it so passionately and in a way that I was like, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. And that, I guess, is that was hard for me to sort of correlate that with something that wasn't going to work.
Yeah, it's a real disconnect there,
isn't it? It's a real disconnect. And so that's a really tricky one when you find someone who is a good person. They have the best intentions for you and your child.
Yes.
But unfortunately, for whatever reason, are not up to date on the research. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, that was a really odd, really tricky experience for us.
Yeah.
Thank goodness then I did more research after that and looked into all the sort of therapies we did and didn't want to do.
Yeah.
But I definitely wish I had that knowledge prior to putting him through that, prior to putting us through that. And, this was before we were on NDS, so it was all a cost out of our pocket and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm really glad that these questions have come through because, like I said, at the start of our journey, I wish I knew more.
Yeah. And it's true. It is such a journey, and it is so hard to know what is fact versus not fact, especially it's from a nice person.
Yes.
And this is where it's really important to divide. Yeah, exactly, because you can Google everything and it's
even
uncurated.
Now when I Googled it, like to do the research for this, there's still so many
much.
different things. There's things that endorse it and there's things saying not.
Yeah.
It just depends on what link you click.
Yeah, that's right. And I would say that the big thing to really think about with this is trying to separate the position from the person. So the person and the position, they're just two different things.
Yeah.
A person can be not a nice person, but their position might be evidence-based, right? But they could be a really nice person, but their position is not evidence-based. So we have to divide the two and you kind of have to, it's just, I know it's another thing to have to think about, and that's a failure a little bit on our system to not be able to help parents to differentiate between that.
Yeah.
But you do have to go in there and almost evaluate and ask those questions. And I would never, like with you, I would never, if a parent had done an intervention that was, below the worth it line, I just put it down to let's just give you the information that you need so you can make the decision.
Yes.
It has to be an informed choice.
Yes.
I know the latest science. I can tell you all of that and describe it to you as objectively as I possibly can, and then you can make that choice.
Yes.
But for me, it's always about making it worth your time. I think it's an ethical code of conduct for me, but also for my profession. And so it becomes really important. But it is really hard. And Vojta is also very hard to access. There's not many people trained in it.
Very much
I think so, like we spoke about a few weeks ago, if it's not really that available, because there's scarcity, right? If there's scarcity, you're more likely to go, oh, I really want that. When you go to hotelbookings.com and they go, oh, 2 other people are looking at this, quick, book now. And you go, okay, I'll book now. I don't really want to go on holiday, but okay. So you do it because there's scarcity, and that's one of the weapons of influence.
Yes.
And it's a well-known, marketing tool.
It is.
And there's very few people there. You're like, oh, this must be so hard to get. Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. And so it just reels you in, and you're just you want the best for your child.
Exactly. It's all done with the best of intentions.
Yes. You're like, okay, I must go for it. But my caution there is if we know about it and we think there's promise in it, we will invest time into it as a whole global group of clinicians and researchers. So if it's not on our radar, it's very unlikely it's because we've missed it.
Yeah.
And in this case, it wasn't missed. It's been documented. There's been no other work in it.
Yeah.
So, I think that's pretty much Vojta, really, in that way.
Yep.
We didn't get a chance to talk about NDT, but maybe, do you want me to quickly go into it now?
Sure.
Yeah? Okay, right. So NDT is also neurodevelopmental therapy called Bobath, and it was developed by the Bobaths back in the, I think, 50s and 60s as well. And they revolutionized back in the time to go, hey, these kids have more potential. And it was based on a lot of handling. So it was the first real technique for children with cerebral palsy.
Yeah.
So it was the real foundations for it. There was a real community around it. And, what we saw, what we understood is we could understand cerebral palsy better. And these guys were instrumental in helping us to understand cerebral palsy better.
Okay.
So, there's so much credit there, and so much so that it was about 2008, 2009, before the systematic review came out. Again, Bobath, spoiler alert, is below the worth it line. I got trained in it.
Yeah, wow.
So I went to Queensland, did an 8-week course. It was paid for by my organisation. Lots of people, hospitals, we sent people over to get trained in this course. And we understood cerebral palsy better as a result from it. But unfortunately, again, the science of it just didn't quite move on and keep up with what we now know.
Yeah.
Again, very based on reflexive things, where if you put your hands on your child and you turn the body in a certain way, you can relax the tone for a moment in time.
Yeah.
And if my hands are on the kid, they look good. I take my hands off the kid, they're back to their normal body again.
Yeah.
So it was all about using tonal influences and reflexes, very hands-on.
Yeah.
Because it was so hands-on, it was really quite passive for the child. I was guiding their movement more than they were.
Yeah.
So they really weren't learning any new skills.
Yeah.
And when you think back to all the kids who've had Bobath over their entire life, and I know them in their 20s and 30s, I'm not sure we made that much difference to how they function now as an adult.
Wow.
And that's quite a reflection.
I bet.
And, I spent a lot of time doing the training.
Yeah.
And it just didn't pan out. So they've now done massive systematic reviews where they've compared kids who have done Bobath versus those that didn't do Bobath over a period of time and with high intensity. They've compared low intensity and high intensity. There was no difference.
Wow.
So you could do nothing.
Wow, and get the same outcome, but have a lot more money and time.
That's right.
Wow.
Because we're talking 30, 60 hours of this therapy. And so we finally had to come to a point to go, the evidence just doesn't check out. We've all got a bit of an emotional attachment to this because we've been trained in it. The Bobaths were beautiful people again, but the science didn't check out and we're not actually enhancing skills like we thought we were. The numbers didn't show. And I look at it myself and I go, I haven't seen the outcomes that I thought I would have.
Yeah.
And so I had to let it go.
Yeah.
And
I can see why you're so passionate about research now.
So important.
Yeah.
Because I can't bear saying to a family, hey, you should do this. And I go, actually, the science doesn't check out. But we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
It's not what we're about. And so being evidence-based is also about letting things go. And I have an emotional attachment to Bobath and NDT. My mentors taught me in it, but they've all said the same thing. It's like, it's the old way now. We need to move on with it. And it's hard.
It is, I bet.
But if we're in it for the right reasons, we're here to improve lives. So
not waste time.
Look at the next thing, because if we're caught in this, we're going to be blinded to the new things that are coming. And gosh, the new things are coming.
Oh, amazing.
Right?
Yeah. Incredible.
So that covers really quickly NDT in a nutshell and Vojta. But they're based on the same theories. I guess they're both below the worth it line because they're based on really old science, developed with the best intentions back in the 60s and 70s. Yeah. And it just didn't move on. And how great is it that we know more about the brain now?
Thank God. Absolutely.
Right.
We're
not institutionalizing children.
Yeah.
We're not, we're in the community.
Getting better and better. Thank goodness for that. And thank you so much for sharing. I just think that's so important. Thank you for all the questions that came in. It's good to know other people are interested as well.
Yeah, it's really good. That's really good. And remember, it's never personal. It's really based on an objective result. We are just wanting to make sure we communicate it in the best way possible. Yes. And there's never any judgments on people who've done it, like with me. I have moved on, and that's okay. But we have to have these conversations, and I think that's really healthy.
We have to learn from other people.
That's right. Yeah, that's good. Cool. Thanks for the question.
Thank
it was a big
you.
one.
Thanks, Dayna.
You're very welcome. Hope that was useful for all of you guys listening, and we'll talk to you all again really soon. Bye.
Bye.